Hello and welcome to the Small Business Happy Dance. My name is Rachel and today I'm interviewing Sally Allen from Learn with VR. Since 2007, Sally has worked in IT, and in 2016, after the successful sale of an IT services business where she was head of HR, Sally founded her own consultancy, blending face-to-face training with learning technologies. Hello and welcome, Sally.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks very much for having me on today's show.
Do you want to tell me the story of your business?
Sure. So, Learn with VR was born out of just trying virtual reality headset experiences myself. The first time I ever did it, I was just amazed with how genuinely immersive it was, and thought, oh, there's a cool opportunity here to try and mix games and try and mix some of the training experiences that already are available into workshops. And I just really enjoy people experiencing virtual reality and getting that buzz from being transformed into a different place, but also from a training point of view, just how quickly you can apply skills in these virtual worlds. So yeah, it came out of just trying it myself, seeing how much other people enjoyed it, and thinking, yeah, let's play with this a bit and let's incorporate it into workshops.
I mean, I can speak for everyone on the podcast. We have all experienced a death by PowerPoint training session. You know what I mean? Where we've all sat there and been subjected to probably the 100th time the trainer's given that training, and it's been, very done by rote, and it's not been very interactive, and you can come out of those and nothing has gone in. I mean, I whenever I do any learning, I take like all of the pens, every, have the color of the rainbow. I prefer a blank notepad, and I will probably doodle, draw, get quite creative with it, because I feel this is just how I learn. I learn better when I'm putting it into my own words and my own colors and everything. So but how would doing a virtual reality training session versus a traditionally delivered training session be? How would that feel as a participant?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things there, and what you've touched on about different learning styles is really important, because we all have our preferences, and for some of us we'll learn best when we are in discussion. For some of us it's reading, some of us are more kinetic type learners, but I think we all learn best when we're having fun. So the purpose of incorporating virtual reality into training is actually not to replace the expertise and the sort of knowledge transfer or the skills development, but to enable participants to have the opportunity to apply the skills that they've learned. So to give you an example, you might have been on a traditional presentation skills training course, and you've kind of talked about presenting and body language, hand gestures, etc. And then you get to apply that in a workshop, and that's great. But it's not often sort of replicating the types of scenarios where you would be doing a presentation. So where virtual reality can come in is that you can still have that expertise from that trainer, but you can put the headset on and you can be in front of an audience that you are going to deliver to. So you could go into a TEDx room, for example, or you could go into a large lecture theatre if you're preparing to give a presentation in that type of environment, or even a banqueting hall where you're presenting a charity dinner. So because it feels so realistic to you, and because your mind is telling you, oh, okay, actually this is like real life, then it's immediately generating that sense of sweaty palms, heart pounding, feeling nervous. And that's what I really love, because yes, you can always practice things, in the safety of your training room, but actually having the opportunity to practice in something that's very, very, similar to where you're going to actually deliver these new skills, just gives it a different edge. And that's where I come back. That's fun. When people put the headset on and they're like, oh, wow, I'm in a big conference room and there's 90 people looking at me, it creates engagement and knowledge retention. But yeah, it's fun. And I think that's the most important thing.
I love that experiential part, because some of the, like you say, the best training sessions I've been part of, you've had like I went on a coaching one in the NHS, and it was like an entry level, like how to do coaching with, you know, people in your team or whatever. And there was 3 of us, and we went off and did a little bit of coaching with each other and applied what we'd learned. And I like really remembered that, because I felt like I experienced we experienced coaching, but also the 3 of us were really well matched and were able to give really good feedback to each other. And I had coaching from my manager. You're not meant to have it from your manager, but she was doing a training course, and we decided I wanted to be a coachee basically. And I was able to apply what I'd learned from her as well. And it was just, I got a lot out of that, and I remember it very, very vividly. Whereas there's certain ones that are definitely not as memorable in terms of, are there certain things that it suits more than other things in terms of with training? Is there certain aspects that are better? Like, for instance, like interviewing and presentation skills, it sounds like it'd be great for that. Is there anything that it doesn't work as well with?
So where I think it works best is if you think about scenarios where you've been on training and you've thought, oh, okay, I'm going to role play this. That's where it comes into its own. Or likewise, actually, if you're training somebody in something really specific. So Walmart, for example, they put thousands of their shop floor workers through a virtual reality simulation where they learn a particular way of stacking a click and collect tower, and that worked really well for them. And their kind of feedback that they give on that was that people retained the knowledge of how to do it because they were actually simulating that experience. So it works very well for applying something that's very specific, like a hard skill, perhaps, health and safety, or addressing a particular kind of hard skill training need, as well as those sorts of situations where you are role playing. I guess where it doesn't work so well is if you're needing to have real kind of in-depth discussion about something. So, if, for example, you really need to sort of talk through in a large group, I would say that maybe at the moment the software and the products aren't sophisticated enough to kind of enable that sort of person-to-person group discussion.
I'm living for the fact that you could put me in a virtual reality where I am doing a TED talk. I'm like,
yeah, I could see you loving that, Rachel.
Yeah, me in the TED talk room.
Yeah, and the challenge is that if you're going to go and do a TED talk, it's really difficult, isn't it, to sort of simulate. You can practice in front of your friends, or you could record yourself, on Zoom software or whatever, and and play yourself back. But actually, the first time you're going to do that is probably when you're in that TED room, and you want that to be brilliant. So if you've got the opportunity to use virtual reality where you can simulate that sort of room, and you get feedback on how interesting you came across, how good your eye contact was, how much you look towards the left or the right side of the room, that's going to really speed up your learning development and the progress that you make, and give you a real boost of confidence. Because actually, when you come to do the real thing with real people in a real room being filmed, you feel like you've been there before. So I think the other really important thing about virtual reality and some of these training simulations is that it's about boosting your confidence. Because if you think about the origins of virtual reality, where they were using it for, space or oil exploration, areas where people couldn't go, the premise of it really was that you couldn't get that wrong in real life, so they had to build the confidence of people who were going to fly planes through these sort of simulators. Only now the software has become so much more readily available that we can simulate things like a TED Talk.
So let me get this right. If I did a presentation through the headset as a TED Talk, it will tell me, the AI will tell me if it's interesting. I mean, that sort of blows my mind.
Yeah, so some of the software packages that are available out there can give you, for example, what's known as like sentiment analysis. So say you have popped your headset on and you've been talking for 5 minutes. One of the things that you can get back is the ability to play yourself back, which is brilliant, because then you can learn through watching yourself back, which is awesome. It's a great way to learn. But secondly, you can have, as as you say, some AI analysis that's like sentiment, that's going to say things like how many ums and ers and hesitations you'd got on the kind of filler words, but also actually the kind of looking at the structure of your words and saying, asking questions about how easy you were to understand, and whether you were using loads of jargon, and whether or not you were engaging, and whether or not it was interesting. But I never underestimate the sense of playing yourself back is super powerful. And that's another reason why I really love VR, because I've seen learners play themselves back, and it's a bit cringy. And they're like, oh, I can hear my voice, and it's not very comfortable. But it's really, really impactful. And particularly combined with the information, it just makes you think, okay, well, next time I'm going to make sure I really look across all the side of the room, not just focus on the left-hand side.
I mean, I think that's fascinating about the jargon, because when you're in an industry, for instance, I used to work in the NHS, you use that jargon so much, and there's so many acronyms and shorthand ways of saying things, and you go into a room with the public who are not educated in that, and I have seen some things totally fall flat because they didn't understand. And because you every day you're speaking like that, you forget, oh, somebody might not know what that stands for. That would be really powerful if you were going to do a really big high power presentation, and your audience might not understand the jargon, and to have that feedback. Wow.
Yeah, and it gives you the, as you say, the opportunity to practice ahead of events like that. So just to check those things off, to make sure that, that we're not using jargon and that our language is accessible to people. It's just putting a different structure, I think, around and looking at how we communicate, which is just so important. So if we get feedback and we get insight and we review ourselves, these are all positive ways for us to continuously improve.
And what organizations are best suited to using VR for their learning purposes?
That's a great question. And when we're talking about virtual reality and we're talking about headsets, although this is increasingly mainstream technology, if you like, I was reading a latest report that says that of organizations that have invested in virtual reality headsets, only 7.5% of them are using that for learning and development. So we've got a long way to go before this is actually used sort of as part of everyday training practice. Higher education, universities, they're definitely using virtual reality as part of their educational practice, which is fantastic to see. I don't think it's necessarily about a type of organisation. I think it's about the appetite to explore. And the organisations that that I've worked with who have used this virtual reality, and said, yeah, that's cool, let's try that in a workshop. They tend to be organisations that are interested in tech and are going to be open to trying something new. So I think it's more about attitude to just trying something new, and rather than being a huge organization with huge budgets.
Slightly random question, but I used to be an IT project manager as well. And I'm interested in the background. So if I was a business that wants to use virtual reality to train my staff in customer service, for instance, there was phone lines, and I wanted them to train them in different ways of dealing with customers who might have complaints. Do I have to? Does the package come to me already done, or is there a lot of tailoring that you go through with a business to work it to their specific requirements? I'm just really curious about that bit.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And yes, there would be definitely there would be some tailoring, particularly around ownership of equipment. Probably you guys are going to consider sort of which hardware you want. So which type of, there's not just one headset out there. There are numerous manufacturers, and you're going to think about, okay, we're going to have this sort of in our own training suite, or are we going to send these out? Maybe we're going to license some software. So yeah, it is about sort of building a bespoke project. Although at the same time, obviously, we can. Organizations don't necessarily have to buy that equipment. We can come in with our own, and as I say, we sort of run workshops with people.
Wow, because I was just thinking about building that decision tree thing. like, it's the project manager in me, so it's probably a bit boring, but I'm just thinking of, like, if you've got a specific way that you want, whether the software, because that means that there's a bit of setup beforehand, isn't there? If you're going to invest in this, there's actually a bit of a setup to start with, and then there's a setup of the software, and then obviously you probably go through a process of tweaking that to get it completely right. Is that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the other thing to consider is that if you're going to make an investment in having headsets as part of your training offering, as part of learning and development for your teams, you're going to go through kind of several discussions about whether or not, how are you going to use that in your organization? Are there packages that you can buy, training experiences that are available? And if so, do they fit your individual needs? Or are you going to create your own? So are you going to actually think about building your own learning experience, which would involve, filming, production, actually building technically that experience that maybe you then own and can be rolled out across, all your guys. So yeah, I think that the conversation is going to be, how are we going to get most value out of this for our organization? How are we going to get value out of this? Because what you don't want to do is obviously invest in headsets and then it becomes shelfware. You've kind of done it just for one thing once. And I think that's actually the great thing about virtual reality is that because more and more of these experiences are being built, and because more people are purchasing headsets, I think it's 171 million worldwide was the latest stat that I saw. So as we build more of these experiences, we'll be able to use more and more of them for learning and development, as well as create our own in much more easily than we have been able to previously.
Wow, that's so interesting. Is there anyone that can't use a virtual reality headset?
So instantly you think obviously about somebody with impaired vision, because this is a very visual experience and it's taking you somewhere else. I have on occasion had people put their headsets on and them not like it. Whether that's it's quite unnerving when you put your headset on and then all of a sudden you're in a different space. So for some people, it might take a bit of time for them to either adjust to that or just to say, I don't like it. So I know at Meet Space VR, where that's a virtual reality arena, I know that the guy who owns that was telling me that actually it's so realistic that when a customer of his put a headset on and he suffers with agoraphobia, actually it wasn't the being enclosed, it was the fact that the experience was so real and he was in this huge space that he had to take it off. It brought on those fears of being in very wide open spaces, because that was what the particular simulation was. So yeah, it's interesting. I think it would be wrong of me to say, yeah, everybody can do it, because there are, a small percentage of people who just won't, perhaps like that level of immersion. And that's cool. And either there are ways that you get people to feel comfortable or it's just not for them.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I just wanted to cover, because I did do a little bit of research. I know that might come as a surprise to some people who watch this, but I did do some research. And I went on a website, it's called Ask the Public, and I typed in virtual reality, and it was really interesting because there was like this long list of like things that people were worried about, like they'd ask questions about. It must have been, I think they use Google as their, they analyze Google Analytics of what people are searching for. So some of the myth busting I'd like to hear about from you, but the ones that I found which were interesting were, will virtual reality make me feel sick?
So potentially, I mean, if you're in a really immersive roller coaster type experience and you're the type of person who would feel sick on a roller coaster, then it might very well either evoke that kind of memory, bring back that memory, or you just might feel that motion sickness. If you're just practicing interviews across a table and you're in a simulation, it's very unlikely to make you feel sick, although it might be if you're nervous, obviously, so facing somebody, because it's that realistic. But no, so it depends on the level of immersion and you yourself as to, what makes you feel sick.
Is it bad for your eyes?
As a child, the recommendation is that you leave sort of trying virtual reality until you're older, until teenagers, obviously their eyes are getting stronger. Is it bad for your eyes? I would suggest that, certainly after sort of half an hour, you need to take a little bit of a break. It's a bit like us looking at the screen, again, after 20 minutes, we need to sort of look away. It's like, you need to be a bit careful, but it's not a major issue. Some people wear the virtual reality goggles over their glasses. Anyhow, you can do that. So you don't just have to be, you can actually make your headsets work over your glasses.
That's good to know.
Is it glasses, Rachel?
Yeah. One question was, can virtual reality change my mind? And I wasn't like, I don't know whether they mean like, I would love to chat to that person and ask them exactly what they meant, but I'm assuming they sort of mean like, can it alter how you think? And I don't know. Interesting.
It is. And actually, if you spin that round and you think about things positively, you could answer that question and say, yes, it can change my mind. So to give you a couple of examples, virtual reality is and can be used to help people with phobias. So in a safe and controlled way, and with a professional practitioner, you can, for example, use simulations around your fear of spiders. So just by being coached and having the experience in a safe space of actually seeing spiders can help you overcome that fear. So in answer to the question, yeah, it can change your mind because you genuinely feel like you have been there and that is a lived experience. It can change your mind. I'll give you a couple more examples if I may, just quickly on that, because I think it's a really interesting point. Last Thursday, I went to Innovation Birmingham and was lucky enough to go to a launch of Round Midnight, an organisation, an immersive theatre company who are using virtual reality as a way of enabling kids to have a conversation about knife crime. Because you put the headset on and you're immersed into a situation where, with a group of teenagers, you start to make choices about whether or not you go along with what's happening as a situation escalates towards knife crime violence. And their studies are showing that because of the level of immersion and because of the discussion that can encourage amongst kids, that it's changing their minds about the sorts of choices that they would make. It's backed by West Midlands Police, and it's something that hopefully will be rolled out in much greater numbers. It's an absolute privilege to go and watch virtual reality being used in something so positive like that. So absolutely, it can change minds, but it could change lives, and that's why again, in America, and in the right conditions and with medical support, former soldiers who've come back and are suffering from PTSD go into simulations, warlike simulations, to help them as part of their recovery process and therapy. It enables and support some of the therapy that they go through. So it can change minds if you in a positive way. If that's the nature of the question, then sure, it definitely can.
I love the story about supporting children to make better decisions regarding knife crime. I think that is a really unexpected application. Well, I don't know a lot about virtual reality, put my hands up, I don't know a lot about it. So that is what a story if you can help children, because peer pressure is such a big deal, and if they're using simulations that are quite similar to actual things that have happened, then you can potentially help them to make such different choices. And I didn't know you could use it for the phobias. Oh my goodness.
And what was really interesting, and it comes back to this idea that because it's so lifelike, it's immersive and you feel like you're there, is that when the adults were trying it, so when I tried the knife crime scenario, although being 12 is a long time ago for me, it genuinely brought back memories and a sensation of what peer pressure felt like when I was a teenager. And that It's really, really interesting, I think, that when you immerse yourself in those types of experiences, because you're seeing the perspective of somebody else, you're genuinely putting yourself in the shoes of other people. In terms of developing empathy, it's a very powerful tool. I felt differently about, it reminded me, actually, it seems like such an obvious thing to say, oh, call the police, I don't want anything to do with this. But when you're a teenager and you're with your mates, your priorities just are totally different to when you're a 42-year-old mom and you want to keep everybody safe. Your priorities are, different. You want, to be included, and therefore your judgment calls are different. And yeah, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I think that, the more kind of projects that come out of those kinds of initiatives where we're using virtual reality to build empathy and to put ourselves in other people's shoes, it's very powerful.
Gosh, the applications of that sounds like limitless. That could really help with equality and diversity discussions within businesses. And I could think of it being things in the NHS delivering bad news, or all sorts of, wow. I hope that every child in the UK gets to experience and go through that, because that could definitely save lives, couldn't it?
Yeah, and this is really big picture stuff, but when you go through that level of immersion, it could, if this became a more mainstream application, imagine if we all went to the library, and as well as getting books out, we experience of what it was like to be, an old person, or to be somebody with a particular challenge. To me, that could end up in a fairer, kinder society, because we know what, if we put on, we know, don't we, when we watch TV and when we watch documentaries and we're moved by it, or we watch charity raising events and we're moved by stories, that the power of storytelling creates action. Well, if you put on that headset, if you think about, if you were raising money for a cause, and you could have that headset on and actually live and see, just for a few minutes, the challenge that somebody's facing, I think it would raise empathy levels, and I think it would raise, levels of kindness. So, there are negative sides of virtual reality. This is not a solution for all society's ills, but when applied properly, in like the example that I've given you around knife crime, then it could genuinely make for a kinder, fairer society.
Do you have any business books that you read? Is there anyone that you would suggest?
Yeah, I'd read anything by Brené Brown, or watch her. She's got loads of clips on YouTube, because I think some of her mindset stuff is particularly important for startups and when you're on your own. And definitely. I guess instead of a business book, maybe my recommendation would be to look at either read or access via YouTube or wherever some of the work of Carol Dweck around growth mindset. I just think that's so important. Some people just may instinctively have all that kind of approach and attitude towards being comfortable with being uncomfortable and continually wanting to learn. I wasn't, when I started out working for myself. I was somebody who would rather just get on with things and not face difficult situations and get on with it. And I've had to really adjust my mindset into constantly looking for changing my language to be being more positive, and me saying I can't do that, but I can't do that yet, or if I do, then I will be able to. And that for me has been a real challenge, because I just found it much easier to say I can't do this. I can't work out how to set a website up. I can't do it. And I really had to work quite hard on, okay, stop. How do I do this? And she's good. She's great for that. Her work, definitely. I would recommend her.
I will leave a link in the description to one of her books, and so you can go and check that out. And if you are enjoying the podcast today, please like and subscribe. It really, really helps us with the algorithm, and we really appreciate it. So, and if you're really into seeing our content, then press that little notification bell next to the subscribe, and you will get notified every time an episode goes live. Do you have 3 words to sum up your business?
Fun, innovative, collaborative.
So if people want to get in touch with you, I will leave all the links in the description below so you can get in touch with Sally. And you're running virtual reality in arenas, aren't you? Do you want to tell me more about that?
Yeah. So this is fun. So as I touched on earlier, there are spaces, so large spaces where you can go and play games. So if you think like virtual escape rooms, or more on the kind of gaming side, and you can play, it's great for team building. And the way in which we've been kind of incorporating it into away days, team building, or sort of leadership days, is just to get teams back together. And the great thing is you can be socially distanced, start to play some of these simulations where you're having to help your teammates. And if you're a team that are looking to uncover your team strengths and just to remind yourself a little bit about how the roles that you instinctively play, it's absolutely brilliant for sort of kickstarting that conversation, and then having that facilitated around, perhaps your goals or your strategy for the next 6 months. But it is so much fun. You can, and you can be a team if you want to make it competitive. You can be a team who are, firing arrows at orcs, or having to make battles with goblins and dragons and stuff. So there's that kind of sort of fantasy, truly immersive, but being a bit competitive against one another. And then there are other games that are really sort of starting to explore how you solve problems as a team, and how you communicate between each other. And I think that's really important, that teams have been through so much over the past 19 months, and some of them have been disparate, and then we've had new team members, and we're still in a period of uncertainty. So just to get people back into a space that's really different, that is a lot of fun, I can't recommend it enough. And certainly the groups that we've done it with, if nothing else, they've had a real giggle, and they've tried something that from a tech point of view is superb.
That sounds so much better than any of those team building where they take you into like a river and they make you build some sort of raft. For starters, I don't like being in the water, so that would immediately, I would have issues with that. Like, I don't think there's any sort of team building where I have to get in a wetsuit and get a life jacket on that I'm interested in. But maybe that says a lot about the teams that I've been in, that I do not trust these people to not drown me mid-river. But I like the idea of it being like a completely taking you out of literally any sort of reality and putting it into fantasy. Means that there's going to be people's different skill sets are going to come. I feel like they would.
No, you're right.
Change the dynamic.
Yeah, it's very leveling experience, because invariably people haven't done it before, or even if they have, they won't probably have played this particular game before, and therefore the sort of hierarchies can really be broken down quite quickly, because you are doing something new. And it does Meet Space VR say that we blow minds. That's the arenas that are in Nottingham, Birmingham, and Wembley, and they say we blow minds, and they do. When you do it, it is mind-blowing, and it is fun, and it makes people giggle. And it comes back to my original point that people learn best when they're having fun, and therefore you can start to tackle some of these conversations about, okay, well, what does our business planning look like for the next 6 months? If you've kickstarted that with just a bit of a release and letting off some steam, then you're in a good place to have those conversations, I think.
Yeah, and I think people are more creative when they're less stressed. So you're gonna sure. If you release a bit of that stress and that anxiety, and it's a totally different environment, that you're gonna creativity wants to come into those spaces.
Totally, you've freed your mind up to make space for new ideas, because you've parked. You're not in a boardroom, a meeting room, in the office. You're somewhere different. It's stimulated you, and therefore you're going to be more receptive for ideas to sort of come through, and so that you can share in facilitated sessions.
I have loved talking with you today, Sally.
Oh, likewise, Rachel. Very long sentences from me. I'm sorry, but it's because I just get so enthusiastic.
No need to apologize. Have you met me? I might do shorter sentences, but I do a hell of a lot. There's volume. So if you are interested in taking your team on one of these experiences, I will leave Sally's links to her website and social media down below. It is Sally Allen with the R. So go and check her out. And if you have been enjoying this podcast, please like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, please leave them below. Like, you might have questions that you want me to ask people going forward. If you follow me on Instagram, then you will be able to comment on that, because I do sometimes ask if people have any questions they would like me to ask the guests I have on. So yeah, thank you for watching the Small Business Happy Dance, and I will see you next week.